So welcome to Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. I'm super excited that you guys have chosen yourselves, really. You've chosen to show up for yourself by being here today for this webinar, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, something that a lot of people struggle with, but most of them don't even know that that's what they're dealing with. So you are in the right place, and I can't wait to dive into what we have prepared for you today. So I'm going to just share a little bit about what imposter syndrome is so we're all on the same page and we know what we are overcoming today. All right. So what is imposter syndrome? If you guys know what it is on the top of your head, you can drop it in the chat. I want this to be a very interactive webinar today. So make sure you drop it in the chat. But it is also something that is called perceived fraudulence. It involves feelings of self-doubt and personal incompetence that persist despite your education, experience, and accomplishments. Hello, somebody. Accomplished lawyer here. I've been suffering with imposter syndrome for a long time and did not even know it. So I want you to check yourself, like put that meter on you today, check yourself and figure out, am I this person? Am I the one, regardless of all the things I've accomplished, regardless of all of the education, regardless of all those letters behind the back of your name? Are you suffering from imposter syndrome? And even if you feel that you've overcome it at this juncture of your life, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? So sometimes we go through certain things because we are able to help other people who might be in the same position as us to overcome those things that we have dealt with ourselves. All right. So super excited to be here talking about this subject today. And I just want to introduce who I am and allow my panelists to also introduce themselves. But I am Savannah Barrows, the protector of athletes. You guys, if you follow me or you know anything about me, you know protector of athletes. That brand is strong. But I'm also the counsel to millionaires and athletes. I'm a best-selling author and podcast host, amongst other things. But I will tell you this about me. Imposter syndrome was the one thing that kept me from saying that I was an attorney to millionaires. Although I had been representing them, I didn't even know that I had that word, that was something I was doing. Right. And so when we start to recognize those issues and we begin to overcome, we are able to see ourselves in the right light and in that power zone of what we actually have, what we embody. So that's a little bit about me. I am going to kick it over to, I think Dr. Dominique is next. So Dr. Dominique, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. As the amazing attorney said, my name is Dr. Dominique Pritchett. I am the woman people call when they are ready to audit, boost awareness, and activate a mental health management plan before or after a crisis. As the owner of Beloved Wellness Center, a private practice based in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I center the experiences and lives of Black women and girls. Also, I'm the podcast host of Space for Sisters.
Hello, somebody. So if you guys have not heard of Dr. Dominique Pritchett, go and check her out. Check out her website because she does some amazing, amazing work. And without further ado, we have the amazing Holly Summers. Holly, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell people who you are, where you are joining us from, and how they can also connect with you.
Yeah, I'm Holly. I'm a 2L at New York Law School, so I am calling from sunny New York right now. It's a beautiful day. We're very excited about that. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram at ProsecuteRests, but I am super excited, very honored to be here, and I'm really hoping that we're going to reach a bunch of people educating about imposter syndrome.
Absolutely, absolutely. So these women are absolutely phenomenal. Yes, Dr. Dominique, follow her. So you have her, I think her website for Space for Sisters, but she's dropped her other information in the chat. So definitely make sure you guys connect with her. She is a powerhouse, to say the least. She is definitely a powerhouse. All right. So y'all bear with me because trying to navigate these pages. So again, welcome to Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. If you are just jumping in with us, today is all about unleashing the power within so you can show up and show the world who's boss. We all have that boss inside of us. And I ain't talking about BOSS, but I'm talking about the BAWSE. We got to put some sauce into it. We are the boss, okay? But some of us might be afraid to show up in all of our bossness because of one reason or another. All right. So today we are going to overcome imposter syndrome. We are going to unleash the power that we know resides on the inside of us. And not only are we going to show the world, but we're going to show ourselves. We're going to commit to ourselves and show us to show up that we are truly the boss that we are called and created to be. So a few things I want to share with you guys before we dive right into a lot of content is I just want to ask you if you knew about these statistics. As you know, well, let me ask you this. Who is a high achiever in the room today? If you are a high achiever, you consider yourself to be a high achiever, man, holla at your girl. Drop yes in the chat. Let me know who is in the room because I am definitely one of those high achievers. But 25 to 30% of individuals who recognize themselves as high achievers suffer with imposter syndrome, whether they know it or not, right? They might just feel like, well, I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough, or I got to go and work on this particular event way much more because I need to make sure I'm hitting all the T's and dotting the I's. You might be suffering from imposter syndrome. There's a study that also says 60% of women suffer from microaggressions, and that also increases that rate in Black women and lesbian women. That has something to do with imposter syndrome too, or it contributes to the imposter syndrome. If you always feel like you're being micromanaged or microaggressed in some way, you might feel like you can never do the right thing at the right time to get the result that you desire. So that might make you feel like you have to show up in a different way. That's imposter syndrome. Then there's a study that shows that 82%, up to 82% of people are struggling with imposter phenomenon. Doesn't matter your race, your gender, your creed, your religion, doesn't matter the way you grew up. I think maybe sometimes our environment might have some contributing factors to it. We'll let Dr. Dominique talk about that. But at the end of the day, the whole point of this stat is the fact that everybody, suffers from imposter syndrome at some point in their life, at some level in their life, at some point of achievement in their life. It is going to come up. But the goal is for us to recognize imposter syndrome when it actually does and put ourselves in the best position to overcome it. So as we go throughout this program, I want you to kind of think about what bucket do you fall into? So there's a study that said that there's 5 different types of imposter syndrome. There's a perfectionist. Hello, perfectionist. If you're perfectionist, drop me in the chat. Hello, perfectionist. Listen, Holly done this research. Holly sent this to me. And when I saw the list, I was like, well, dang, I'm about almost all of these. Okay, so hello, perfectionist. Hello, superwoman or superman. If you feel like you're just doing all the things, you got to do everything. You got to save everything and save everyone. Chances are you are suffering from imposter syndrome. If you are the natural genius, the person just like, oh, I just got it figured out. I can handle that. I can do this. Might be imposter syndrome. The soloist or the expert, it might be imposter syndrome. So let me just share a little bit of the descriptions for this. So the perfectionist, we all know what this is. This is classic, right? So success is rare, satisfying because they believe they could have done better. So typically that success is very short-lived. I've been there, and I'm sure many of you in the room probably suffer with the same thing, especially if you said that you were a high achiever before, then you see a success, you're like, oh, that's good, but more could have been done, right? Imposter syndrome might be showing up. To be a superwoman or superman, you are convinced that you are showing up as a fake or a phony compared to your colleagues. They often push themselves to work harder to measure up. Who pushes themselves harder to measure up? Although you're already measuring up. All right. I had this conversation with Holly the other day, and I said, I realized it took 2020 for me to recognize, guys, that I'm doing so many things. I'm like, you need to sit your ass down. You are done. Just show up with what you have and who you are. Right. So if you're trying to push yourself, at some point, you're going to just push yourself out because you're not going to have any more to give. You're not going to have any more energy, motivation, or anything, right, to keep going. The natural genius, they judge their competence based on ease and speed of their efforts. All right. They believe they need to just be a natural genius to succeed. That doesn't really fare well with a lot of people. All right. The soloist, they feel as though asking for help reveals their phoniness. Who in here today struggle with asking for help? Struggle with just saying, listen, I need you to take care of this because I just got way too much going on. But then you go and you try to do everything. So it kind of goes back around to that Superwoman or Superman characteristic. And then the expert measures their competence on what and how much they know or can do. They believe they will never be enough. They fear being exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable. I feel that one. I feel that one 100%. So we're not just going to be on this webinar today, just selling you guys very superficial information. The goal is for us to also talk about the things that we've seen show up in ourselves, how it is helping us to free ourselves, how it's also helping us to be powerful, right? In the positions that we hold, but also in our personal lives. And as we go throughout today, I want you to do the same. But I also want you to recognize what bucket do you fall into, even if it's just one or all, maybe none. Look at the work that can and still be done for you. So if you ever have shown up in this bucket, why did you show up in the bucket? And what did you do to overcome it? All right. So let's dive deep. Imposter Syndrome, Rashika and Jody Ann, these are authors of Harvard Business Journal. Again, shout out to Holly for finding this quote because it's an amazing quote. But they said that imposter syndrome puts the blame on individuals without accounting for the historical and cultural contexts that are foundational to how it manifests in both women of color and white women. So isn't that funny that imposter syndrome shows up more in women than it does men? Right? I showed y'all that stat before about how imposter syndrome or microaggression really fosters more of that imposter syndrome in women. Why is that? Dr. Pritchett, you want to talk about that a little bit?
I sure can. I love this topic because it is so multi-layered, it's generational, it's complex. And if we think about the concept of microaggressions as it relates to being a symptom of imposter syndrome or a catalyst for imposter syndrome, let's use that word. If I use the words generational, compounded, and complex, those are the same descriptors I use when I'm assessing and diagnosing people for PTSD. Okay. So I want to give you all a little bit of background on microaggressions. So there was a study done by Harvard University, and a quote came out of it that different groups endure microaggressions, and this concept is often referred to as death by 1,000 cuts. Whew. When I read it, I felt it because they are literally little jabs, little cuts, little digs. And so as time goes on, we really start questioning, like, do I belong here? All these little digs eventually add up to a big gash. So if I may take a little bit of your time to break down microaggressions, because as I said, it is a conduit for people developing this concept called imposter syndrome. Microaggressions, and I'm looking at different screens too, because I have multiple screens going. So bear with me. I'm still here with y'all. But microaggressions are known as everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults. And here's the thing. I want you to peep this. They can be intentional, conscious, people know what they're doing and saying, or they can be unintentional, the unconscious. And I think it is important that we have that dialogue and call these behaviors out, because some people genuinely don't know when it's happening. It may have been part of their culture or may just be part of their everyday interaction, so they may not know. But what comes out of microaggressions are hostile, derogatory, or negative messages that target people for a number of factors. And here's the thing, especially if we are of marginalized communities or people with different abilities, people in different roles. And yes, my sisters, my women out there, we're part of that marginalized community in many of the high functioning spaces we belong to. And if we look at the history of microaggressions, it actually goes back to the 1970s and was coined by an African-American Harvard psychiatrist named Chester Pierce. Okay. Chester was my homie when I was studying psychology because I was like, oh my gosh, Chester, I don't know much about you, but I'm learning a lot. He specifically tied it to race, but as we can see, it's expanded to a number of marginalized communities, LGBTQIA plus community, religious groups, people with different abilities, and even those with low socioeconomic and intelligence levels. So imagine being in an environment on your campus, in your jobs, on your jobs, and someone who has some seniority over you saying, are you sure you belong at this table? Did you really get an invite? Dig. When we look at microaggressions, they fall in three categories. We have your micro insults. That's the dirtiest of them. It's overt form of microaggressions, those slights, those insults verbally or behaviorally. We have micro insults. Those are those prejudice-based stereotypes through insensitive comments, making presumptions. And if we look at how women develop imposter syndrome, oftentimes when we walk in spaces where we're one or few or the only one, people question like, do you belong here? And this is not knocking anyone who's not in a high functioning or a senior position, but they assume you may be support staff or another role versus you belonging at the big table. The third type of microaggression are micro invalidations. These are comments that have the effect of devaluing, denying our lived experience of an already marginalized people. So when you hear those three types and how it relates to imposter syndrome, I don't know about you, but if I get cut so many times a day, I'm going to start questioning, do I belong here? But I want to invite you to really lean into, you're not a fraud. You're not an imposter. What you are responding to is the everyday things that come about of microaggressions and imposter syndrome. You're responding with anxiety. You're feeling depressed. You have some residual trauma, unproductive thought patterns. You're not a fraud. You're responding.
Yo, come on, Dr. Pritchard. Just take us on the church, girl, today. Because
Yeah.
that is so real. Like, ooh, I felt so many different emotions show up through that information because it is like a whole bunch of jabs, right?
Yeah.
Every day from a particular age. And sometimes, like, how do I want to articulate this? Sometimes the most hurtful jabs are the learned microaggressions that tend to be regurgitated in one's own household because it's something that has been lived through generation after generation after generation. So at a particular age, you might be that woman, right, who has grown up hearing a particular thing or being questioned about, why do you want to do this? Right? Why can I not? Like, we were created to dream. God himself is a creator, right? So we are all creative beings. We are put on this earth to create and to continue creating. But when someone questions your ability to do a particular thing, it still is a microaggression. It is a jab to you. And sometimes it's a jab so deep to your heart that they divert away from their own gifts. Right?
And here's the thing
Go
about
ahead.
the generational aspect. It is a conditioned form, a conditioned response to chronic stress. I believe when our parents and grandparents ask, why you doing too much? You don't want to cause too much attention. That was their conditioned response to chronic stress. And off the top of my head, there was a study done by the American College of Epidemiology in 2019, and they did an association between African-American women living in the US who experienced microaggressions but did never share their experiences. This went on generationally. And they didn't share their experiences with microaggressions and racism. And as a result, they had shortened telomeres. Telomeres are the end parts of our chromosomes that protect our DNA. And those are the biomarkers that play a part in aging, premature morbidity, and mortality associated with chronic stress. And so when we look at how it's being manifested as we're growing up, it is so important that we call out these behaviors to interrupt and disrupt this trauma narrative that's preventing us from showing up in our greatness, our gift, and our power.
That is Jesus. Yeah, that's very deep, because I saw, it could have been the same study. I saw something on that quite a while ago, because I wanted to know if psychological traumas were embedded in, specifically for what I was researching, African American DNA, right? So that just confirms that point. And then based on what you were discussing, when we give into those microaggressions, or we don't find a way to heal ourselves, it does rob us of our inherent powers, the gifts that we do have. Like, we are all born with an innate power to do a thing, and our powers won't be, it won't be the exact same powers of someone else, but it will be our own power. It's the way that we show up in the world. It's the way that we create change. It's the way that we make other people feel. It's the way I showed up on this panel last year with New York Law School and met Holly, just by being myself and operating in my own power. So it's so important that we recognize what is injuring us. As Dr. Dominique Pritchett said, microaggression and some of these other things are like symptoms of imposter syndrome. So if we can diagnose what the issues are, we can see what the real root of our problems really are. And then we can take the prescribed measures to overcome those things. So I want to pivot to Holly, because I had to go and find, y'all had to dig out of the archives, okay? I had to go and find this testimonial. I showed up to New York Law School last year for a panel all on name, image, and likeness. So if you're not familiar with that, it's how college athletes are making money now while they are in college off their own celebrity. And the moderator asked us, what advice would you give students here who are looking at you, who want to have the same success as you? And can I say this too? No one is going to have the same success as somebody else. So we have to stop measuring our success based on other people and what we think other people have and have accomplished. Because some of that stuff is just, it's like window shopping. Until you go in and actually try it on, and then you realize it doesn't even fit, you're just sitting in this illusory bubble, right? But Holly, she wrote this testimonial for me, and I highlighted down here, as a student. So let me go back to the bolded print. So Vanya said to be yourself, and that she believes she is where she is because she was always true to herself. As a student, that is something I have been struggling with lately. I feel like I am an imposter, or that I should change my personality to be seen more. I reached out to Holly after reading this testimonial. And then I jumped on a call with her. I'm like, you're so gorgeous. How do you feel like an imposter, right? And we began to talk about this issue, and Holly shared her experience. So Holly, dive into what you've been experiencing, and how just being in a room, like showing up for yourself, to be in a room, to hear someone just tell you some things that may just be common sense to be yourself, how it can click for you so that you can really show up in the way that you need to, so that you can do and be your best.
Yeah, so I really think that it was just insane timing that you came and you said that to us in the webinar, and that Brandon asked that question as his last question is, what is advice you have? And what you said to me was so powerful, because that same week I had been feeling so just down on myself, and I felt like an imposter the whole week. And it was like insane to me how perfect you saying that was, because when I started law school, I really didn't feel like I had imposter syndrome. I didn't really know what it was. I had always kind of like fit in, school kind of came easy. Most law school students are like that. So I never really had a problem where I was like, I don't belong here. But then I started noticing how competitive law school is, and how if you get called on in class, you don't know the answer, people kind of snicker or they laugh. And if you get the answer wrong, then it's so embarrassing. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And so like my first year of law school, first semester, I was like, I cannot volunteer to speak, because if I get the answer wrong, I will be mortified. And there's no way that I like fit or match these people's intelligences in my classes. How are they volunteering every day and just feeling confident? I don't have that confidence. So I kind of started like growing into it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to push myself. I'm going to push myself to volunteer in class and volunteer to speak and see if I can just get the answer right. And I remember it was probably one of the most detrimental things to my mental health. I volunteered in class and I said something, and the teacher called on me, but then completely ignored my answer, called on someone else who said the exact same thing verbatim. And they were so impressed by that student. And I said to myself, I'm not going to volunteer in class again. That was it for me. And after that, I was like, maybe I said it wrong. Maybe it's my personality. Maybe it's the way I said it. Maybe it's just me in general. The teacher doesn't like me. The professors don't like me. And I was like, I cannot do that again. And it happened like in just like the perfect time where I was like talking myself up. I'm like, this is the time I'm going to answer. This is my time. And I was like, no, I will not be doing that again. And I just remembered I can't keep up. I can't keep up with these people. And I thought, I'll just take on more responsibility. And so that's when I became more of the superwoman. I was like, if I take on more responsibility, then I can prove myself to everybody around me. I can prove myself to my classmates, to my professors, and I'll show them that I'm doing all this, that I'm taking on all these responsibilities, and that I can measure up. I can keep up with them. And I was just thinking, why do I need to prove myself? And Savanya, you said that to me when I was like, I can't volunteer in class, because every time I volunteer, either somebody laughs at me or the professor ignores me and then calls on someone else who says the same thing. And you asked me, why does it matter? Why do you need to volunteer? Why do you have to prove yourself to everybody in your class? And I didn't have an answer for you. And I thought about that for a long time after we talked. And I'm like, why do I? Like, I don't need to prove myself to anybody except for myself. I'm going to take care of myself. And if I know the answer, then I know the answer. And you even told me that, Savanya. You said, write the answer down. If you think you know the answer, write it down, highlight it, and wait for somebody else to answer. And then when you're right, you're right. And that helped me build my confidence so much, because I sat in class. I was like, I know this. I'm going to wait and see. And then every time I was right, I felt myself getting more and more confident to speak. And in one class, I was sitting there and the professor asked a question, and he asked, it was like a number question. And I was like, I know the answer. I'm just going to sit and I'm going to wait. And I showed whoever was sitting next to me the number on my hands. And the professor saw me and he said, Holly, if you know the answer, you can say the answer. You are right. You can say it. And then pulled me aside after class and said, you know what you're talking about. It's okay to volunteer. And that was just a game changer, because no other professor had done that for me and said, you know your stuff, you can answer. And that was huge. So you giving me the advice helped build my confidence. And then on top of that, with the professor being like, you know your stuff, just really helped me so much. But for a while, I was like, I don't measure up. I need to keep, like, if I'm not right, like I'm the expert type. If I'm not right, if I don't know enough, then I'm not worth being here. And that was huge.
Whew, Holly, like you have me so in my feelings right now, because when you know that you are working from a place of service and from a place of your own power, like it's even more easier just to say what is on your mind, hoping that, yeah, I hope it helps someone. But when it really does, it is like, that's the best gift you could give me. I'm trying not to like do a super baby cry on this.
I think
So
the exact language you used to me, you said, I'm unequivocally me. And that's just something I repeat to myself. Anytime I want to talk to somebody or push myself out of my little box, I say, be unequivocally you. And you told me, or you told us in the little panel, you said, I have my clients because they like me. If my clients don't like me, then I don't need them to be my clients. My clients come to me because of who I am. And I tell myself that all the time. My friends like me because of who I am. I don't need to change myself for people to like me. I don't need to change myself to get clients. I'm going to be unequivocally me. And I say that to myself so much ever since I first met you.
Oh my God. Whoa. That's amazing. And it's important that we stay in that circle of authenticity. We don't have to box ourselves in for any one person or anything or any particular achievement. But even as we grow and as we really get on the path to different levels of achievement, you are still going to grow and develop as a person, but you yourself will know what is authentic to you. Like even today, an hour before this webinar, I met with a husband and wife who owns a business together, and they need to possibly rebrand. They don't want to do it. And one of the questions that one of the individuals asked me, well, what else can you tell me? I'm like, I can't tell you anything else. Like, this is what I can give you because I have to show up as my authentic self, not just as a professional, but as my true, credible self. And if we decide to listen to other people, like that one professor who just, for God knows, I don't know what the whole motive was, but if we take the cues and if we listen to the BS about what other people might think about us, or if they just want to put us down for one reason or another, personality conflict, we will never get anywhere in our own personal and professional lives. So it's important that we really kick imposter syndrome to the butt. And it's amazing that you recognize that you started shifting from one bucket to the next, right? Trying to, okay, how do I prove myself? How do I prove and we've all been there. I've been there. I've been the person similar to you. Not that someone would just call on somebody else, but okay, I go and do a thing, but someone else takes all the credit. So what do I need to do to be seen? And how is that harming us in the workplace, in school? I want Dr. Pritchett to talk about um how the imposterism will damage our ability to be risk takers, like reasonable risk takers, where it will help us to become better people, become better entrepreneurs or better lawyers. Holly's in law school, so she's going to be a lawyer one day, like a practicing lawyer. But if you are always questioning yourself and questioning your abilities, questioning your capabilities around anything or your intellect, you are never going to take risk. And there's a reasonable amount of risk that is necessary for you to accomplish anything. You want to go buy a house, guess what? You got to take a risk, because you could put money down on the house, but you might not get your earnest money back if you don't get the house, right? You might decide that you want to have a family one day, but what happens if you can't physically give birth to a baby? There's other risks that have to be involved. Even if you do physically give birth to a kid, there's risk that the baby could perish inside of your womb or you could die. There's risk to every single thing that we do in this world, and we cannot allow other people to shadow who we are and to trump the powers that be. You got to just be. So you find those other mechanisms, like what I shared with Holly. Okay, you think you're right, write it down. Because what I see, how that helps a person is it helps you to practice. And you can see you're already writing it, but then when you hear it, you're like, okay, I got that right. Then when you go back to study it, you're recalling that information over and over and over again. So Dr. Pritchett, help us out. How does these types of like microaggressions mixed with moving from one bucket of imposterism impact our ability to take reasonable risk, which also impacts our ability to develop as individuals and professionals?
Yeah. Holly, I want to commend you. Your story is one of many people in this world. And the day you chose to show up for yourself is the day you started healing from whatever narrative experiences of people who said that you couldn't. And you it in motion for people, and you don't even have to tell the world about it, but they probably see you show up different. You snap your head a little different, you talk different, you showing up for yourself. So I commend you on that.
I
One of
appreciate
the
it.
things, yeah, one of the things I invite everybody to do, check your ego. We hear ego, not I forget who sang the ego song, but, we think of our ego as all of this big energy. No, if we really look at how our ego operates, it's part of our personality. It's made up of our ideas, beliefs, narratives, and patterns. Check it. And Holly, what you did is you took inventory of how I'm operating no longer serves me. And so you stop taking risks. And I did it just last week. I was like, I can't get up on that stage in front of 500 people and speak. I eventually did it, but I had to take the risk because I wanted more. I deserve more. I'm designed for more. But when we don't take those risks, we hear all of those people in our head who said that we couldn't or we didn't need to. They don't have our same vision in mind. And so they're not going to carry the burden. So we need to get them out of our head, evict them. Evict them. It's time for them to go. And they don't get the cute luggage on the way out the door. So when we're looking at our ego, it's important that we redefine and rewrite the narrative of what we envision and what we desire. I'm a huge believer. We don't just manifest over in my world. We actually do the work. Action has feet. Action has feet. And one of the things, Holly, I picked up on that you did, which challenged being a risk taker, is you stopped self-editing. So often marginalized folks, marginalized in the sense, again, role, ethnicity, race, however you want to identify that, whose voice isn't being heard, we start code switching. We start self-editing because we don't think the version of us is good enough to be in that space. I was recently on a college campus and I was talking to, two different groups of young ladies, and they said, well, what if I stop editing myself? Will people like me? And I said, well, they're responding to the version you're telling them you are. But if you stop code switching and stop self-editing and they don't like you, they were not meant for you. So take another risk. When it comes to risk taking and navigating microaggressions, imposter syndrome, we have to determine who has proximity to us. And yes, that can include your professors, your boss, or whoever. When we reevaluate who has proximity to us, we get to match that energy. And guess what we get to do with that excess energy? Take more risks and show up and show out. And the extension of it, if you're stuck with, man, how do I take those risks? How do I get out of my own way? I'd be remiss if I didn't put the plug in for some counseling, because when we show up in new spaces or other new opportunities, we're bringing in a lifetime of ish with us. And so I invite people to go on the journey of redefining and rewriting their narrative. And we're never too old to start healing. Healing has an ing. We don't stop. Because as I call her the attorney, she's like the only attorney. As it was stated in the beginning, we're bosses. In order to show up as our baddest self, we got to do the healing work, or we will act it out when we sit in that class. And should I raise my hand? Should I go in there and say, this is the evidence I have, I deserve that promotion? We're going to act it out. And when we act it out, guess what shows up? The imposter.
That's some good stuff. That is some good stuff. And we've been talking a lot about microaggressions specifically, but now we've been dealing with the issue of taking risk, because it is one of the ways that we can overcome imposter syndrome. So we kind of also talked about with Holly's situation of just trying to do everything. If I can take on more, they will like me or they will appreciate me. Guess what? I am guilty of that as well. And I also fit in this expert bucket, right? I will gladly call myself the expert on some stuff, right? Because I know I'm doing the work to be called the expert. And I didn't even realize, whoa, is that imposter syndrome? Is that imposter syndrome, Shauna? Because true experts don't have to call themselves experts. People just see them as an expert, right? So quick story, guys. Quick story. 2020, we all know what year that was. The year that everybody just wanted to take the world straight to the garbage can. Okay. It was one of the most horrific times in a lot of people's lives. But it was also one of the best times of my lives. It was one of the times that I created new alliances and new relationships. It was the time that I realized I had already done enough. Can you imagine not recognizing that you had been a superwoman or superman for however many years? You've done so much already. It all came crashing down for me, or the realization of it for me, when I had to clean my office and put in more cabinets because I had accumulated so many things over the pandemic. And I started pulling out um, like documentation of achievements from school, achievements from high school, clubs that I had been in, honors that I had been in, dean's list letters from law school, college, scholarship opportunities that I've had. I mean, letters of recommendation from deans of my school, athletic directors when I was in college, letters of recommendation from coaches. I mean, all of this stuff, and it is sitting out on the floor, degrees on degrees on degrees. And literally, I'm sitting on the floor and I just began to cry because I realized not only had I already done everything, but I'm already enough. What do I have to prove to anybody? Absolutely nothing. So I want you to ask yourself, when you're in the midst of doing all of the things, are you really proving something to somebody else, or are you trying to prove to yourself that you're worthy of it? Most times we don't even recognize our own worth. And when we don't recognize our own worth, it costs us a lot, including constantly fitting into buckets that are and is imposter syndrome. Because what we do is we sell ourselves down the street to other people and we allow them to continuously take a deposit out of us without take a withdrawal from us, excuse me, without depositing anything back in. And that keeps us questioning our very being, our intellect and our ability to show up the way that we were designed to show up, powerfully so, nothing less. You are powerful. You were created and designed that way. And I realized that for myself. People would think, and I've had an aunt tell me for years, and these are her words, you are golden. You are golden. And she would tell me, and I would hear it. I'm like, thank you. It would flatter me for a little bit, but then I would go back to that same notion of, I got to do this, the perfectionist, this got to be better. I can't even celebrate this achievement. But that moment sitting in the floor of this office, reorganizing my space, being confronted with all of those achievements, I had to recognize for myself, I am actually golden. And I told someone, I said, you know what? I'm pretty goddamn amazing. And they laughed at me. I said, you can laugh all you want to, but I'm just telling you the truth. Because to some people, it will seem as though you're being arrogant, but arrogance has no place in reality and truth. When you know who you are, you set boundaries on those things. Like Dr. Pritchett said, you look at who has access to you. You also start to recognize how many people have been making withdrawals without making a deposit. Because when you know your worth, things shape up a little bit differently, right? So who here is guilty of doing all the things? There's no pleading the fifth today. We all putting it out on the line. Who's guilty of doing all the things? Because if you feel like you got to do more, if you feel like you need more education, you might be fitting in one of these buckets that I have listed here, the superwoman or the expert, but you might also be fitting in one of those other buckets we shared before. Drop me in the chat, because it's time for us to free ourselves from this. There is a thing too about being the first to do something or being the only one in the room. We might feel like we have to do more. We have to get more education because we are carrying so much of the people who came before us, or we feel like we need to carry the next generation and the generation after that, because no people who preceded us didn't do a damn thing. So we might feel like we have to show and do more while we are holding particular spaces. But the onus is not on you to do that. The only thing that you're responsible of doing is showing up in your authentic self, showing up as a credible person with full honesty and integrity wherever you show up, and make sure you value and understand your worth in the spaces that you do enter. Nothing else is required. Nothing else is required. So, Dr. Dominique, do you want to speak on this a little bit?
I mean, where the offering plate at? Because at this point, just take my whole salary I pay myself. Um, no, you hit it on the spot, and we are so golden. You know, when I think of golden, I think of shining brightly. Who said we had to dim our lights to show up? Going back to that narrative, no one is telling you to do these things. But if you're in spaces where people are making you feel like you don't belong, you claim your time and your space anyways.
That's good. That is good. I want to know from Holly, before we step into these power tips. I know you and I have already had our conversation previously, but I would love to know how this conversation, now a little bit differently from what we've talked about, how is it helping you to recognize what steps you're going to take when you leave here today?
I really just think that, it's so important even to remember that being yourself is all you need to be. And going a little bit back to like the superwoman feeling, the Superman, superwoman feeling is they think that, or I'll claim it. I know I think this. I'm tricking people. I'm tricking
Mm.
people into thinking that I am measuring up or I'm good enough to be here and I'm a phony. But one of the things that helps me is thinking that's selfish. It's selfish of me to think that other people are that easily tricked by me, or that people won't like me unless I'm being someone else. That's me being selfish, thinking everybody around me is shallow, or they're easily tricked. That's something that's helped me a lot, is thinking, no, you got to give the people around you more credit. Surround yourself with people who are going to build you up, and don't just hide yourself, like be unequivocally you. And sometimes I still get in class and I'm like, I can't volunteer today. There's no way what I'm going to say is right. So I'll just write it down. I'll write my answer down and the professor will call on someone else. And I'm like, okay, that was a good, like, first 5 minutes of class. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling better. And then I'll start to build my confidence up. It comes and goes. And I just keep remembering what you said to me: be unequivocally you, and you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. And that's what I remind myself basically every day at law school, is I can be myself, I can be me, and I don't have to prove myself to my classmates or to my professors, as long as I am a genuine person.
That's good, Holly. That is just absolutely amazing. And as you were talking, I began thinking about something. Dr. Pritchett, you shared before on social. So if y'all don't follow Dr. Pritchett, y'all better follow her. Okay. Listen. But anyway, she said something about an episode what was it? Unprisoned. And I watched that. I think it's on Hulu. I watched that episode. And what moved me, I can't remember the actual episode in that series, but what moved me was the little girl in the main character, Kerry Washington, dressed exactly as her. And the little girl in her pulled her from a very negative place and situation and was like, we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to deal with that. Sometimes I believe, or I at least think, that we may have experienced certain traumas in our childhood, and we don't give enough credit to the children in us on how they have protected and served us through that time. And so a lot of time people are, oh, you need to heal your inner child, which could be true. But how about we give credence to our inner child? Because at times, and I'm going to speak for me, but at times I feel like my inner child dared to dream. My inner child made a decision to think so far outside the box and show up so wild, like beautifully wild in this world where other people were maybe confused, uncomfortable. And throughout the years, I ended up pushing that down, which I believe now that I'm recognizing it is another form of imposter syndrome. I felt like I had to start reshaping and changing myself for other people and for other rooms. And I was never really happy. And I think that was another reason why I always felt like I had to do more. Because you know what? I wasn't living me. I wasn't just being me. Yeah, I'm a lot for some people. I'm loud. I'm country. Dr. Pritchett has been with me in like personal settings. She can attest to this. And she was just telling me, girl, you a lot.
That's why we click. We cut up in the most high functioning way.
Yes. Yes. You know, and I think now, so I'm 38 years old, and now I feel over the last probably 5 years of my life, I have had the most fun knowing that I can laugh as an attorney. I can laugh just doing stupid, silly things because I locked my inner child away for so long, feeling like I had to be on this particular construct. I had to show up this particular way. I had to speak this particular way. I had to respond in this particular way because I can't, speak from a place of honesty and truth because I'm gonna hurt somebody's feelings because I'm too blunt, or people say that I'm too mean. We have to give credence and honor to those inner children who are on the inside of us that, yeah, they may have protected us from some things, but we also have to just say thank you. And it's okay for you to just be you. Some of us are just on the inside crying to be released because we're so busy showing up as imposters for other people because we feel like that is the only way that we can be accepted or achieve something in this life. That is false. That is false. So I hope you guys are definitely free today. I really do. Holly says, make your younger selves proud. That's real. I think my younger self to this day is proud of me now. Proud to recognize, okay, you did it. Not only did you did it, but you're having fun while doing it.
Yeah.
So I always felt like I might have needed to marry a serious man because I was a serious woman. But the only reason why I had to be serious is because other people, other circumstances, being a Black woman in America, hello, somebody. People don't want to take certain people or certain classes of people more seriously. So you feel like you have to show up in a particular or different way to be taken seriously. But there's something called building your own table, right? You can show up as whoever you want to be. Hopefully you choose yourself, but you can show up as however you want to show up when you create your own table. And that's something that I've done. And I encourage you guys to create your own table too, because you have freedom in that space. If there's ever a space or, a room where people feel like you have to do or be something else just to be there, you should definitely run quick, fast, and in a hurry. What were we about to say, Dr. Pritchett?
Yep, I love the fact that you brought up Unprisoned, y'all. It's a great series and it's so complex, but you allowing your younger self to shine. I knew my younger self was proud when I could show up in almost any space at this point, and I don't need permission to be me because I feel seen, supported, and I'm psychologically safe. Those are the 3 S's to how I assess who has proximity to me and do I feel a sense of well-being and belonging. Those are not negotiable. Just like I stopped negotiating my identity, I stopped negotiating my gifts, my power, and without perfection as well, because we are so damn human that we will default to what we were accustomed to or what we practiced for a long time. But I know she is proud. And here's the thing, she still shows up when I need protecting from myself. And what you describe, we call it parts work in the therapy world. We are made up of all these individual parts that the ones we try to push to the side, they're fighting because they want to be seen. Let the dark side and the light side show up for you because they are all of you. And that imposter is part of the dark side. We want to pretend like it's not there, but we lean into it when we're uncomfortable. Let it all come to the light.
That's good. And you really see who's there for you too. When they accept that part of you, it doesn't mean that they have to like it, right? But they accept, okay, yeah, that's Savania. You know, hey, that's your person. Those are your people. That's your tribe. And I think I'm more happier now because, like you said, allowing both of those sides to just shine, no matter where I am and who I'm around. I'm realizing that I'm freer, but not only just being freer, I have cultivated meaningful relationships just by showing up as my real, authentic, and like you said, psychologically safe self. Yeah, that's some good stuff. So as we wrap up, guys, I would like for all three of us to share one power tip that you can take back with you to kick imposter syndrome in the butt. I know we talked about a lot. We talked about a lot. So I'm gonna let the youngin go first. Miss Miss Holly Summers.
And even when people say that, don't let that be a sign of imposter syndrome.
It's
We just
not.
acknowledge
Look,
them.
I'm
Don't even
taking
let
a
that.
jab.
My
Jab.
my power tip is coming from Savania's: be unequivocally you, no matter where you are. And if somebody doesn't like it, then they don't need to be at your table. And if there is something that, is unequivocally you, the right people will surround themselves around you, will support you. If you think you have surrounded yourself by people being unequivocally you, but they're still dragging you down, or if they're not happy when you're successful, they're not happy when you're happy, then those are not the right people. So be yourself and make sure that you surround yourself with the people who are happy with who you are and will support you with who you are.
Good stuff. Dr. Pritchett?
Yep. I invite you all to have an attitude of belonging, and more specifically, honor and accept you have a birthright to belong. But you can only live out that belonging with integrity and truth and risk if you know you're not a fraud. If you know the evidence is not adding up that you are a fraud, you have a birthright to belong. And in that birthright, if you're looking for strategies to combat everything, many of the things we talked about, the strategy is in your story. Lean on your story to reshape and redefine where you belong. And here's the thing, we're not meant to belong everywhere. So we have to take shared responsibility for how we're showing up and who we're not calling out when they're doing behaviors that contribute to fraudulent thinking.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. My power tip for you is to do the work on yourself about how you have shown up and how you want to show up. I want you to take note of the achievements you've already have accomplished, like me. Just take it out wherever you have it stuffed at. If it's on the walls, take them off the walls. Pull it out of the corners that it's in and sit with it on the floor. Don't just sit with it on the floor. Be in that space. And thank yourself for getting yourself to that space. Then I need you to go and write it down. Okay, because there will be a constant reminder where you're going to have to Look at the things that you've already accomplished so you can stop believing that you have to do more. When you recognize your worth, you know what you've already accomplished without anything or anyone else, you will feel freer to take the risks that are necessary to get you to the next level. It's not about being an imposter or feeling like you have to do more to get to the next level. You already done it. But now it's just knowing that you have the power to actually be it. So that would be my tip for you guys. This has been one of the most liberating conversations I think I've ever been a part of. I mean, you guys have really made me extremely emotional today, especially Holly, Jesus. But this is how I see today. We started with all of these symptoms and issues of imposter syndrome, but now we've kicked it in the butt. And all that crap, it's on its way to the trash. But you have to be the one that takes it there. You can't leave today still in the exact same way as you showed up. You have to do the work. Take those power tips and really work on yourself. Take adequate inventory every day if you have to. Holly says she recognized every day she wakes up and she tells herself, just be authentically Holly. If that's what you got to do, then that's what you got to do. But we know that we have to throw that mess in the trash so we can really show up as our powerful selves. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining us, for overcoming imposter syndrome. I hope that you stay in contact with me. You can join my new